Microsoft starts warning Windows 10 users about the end of support for Windows 10. Windows 10 users have been getting nags, or pop-ups, warning them that Microsoft is ending support for Windows 10 in October 2025, and they really want you to upgrade to Windows 11, but since most machines running Windows 10 are not compatible with Windows 11, this leaves them in a predicament. Microsoft cutting off support for Windows 10 will have a devastating impact on those that continue to use it after it goes end of life. Not least, new exploits and threats will be discovered that will never get patched by Microsoft, and shortly after, other major software developers will cease support for Windows 10. Such developers include Microsoft, Google, Adobe, etc. The same story goes for hardware vendors such as Nvidia, Intel, or AMD. They will stop supporting Windows 10 after a certain period of time. But isn't it a bit early to be notifying Windows 10 users about the end of support for Windows 10? Yes, it definitely is a bit early for Microsoft to start nagging us to use Windows 11, but with Windows 11 having a very slow adoption rate, compared to the very fast rate at which people adopted Windows 10, in June 2016, Windows 10 was already on about 30 to 40% of computers, Windows 7 was dominant at over 40%, and XP was still being used by around 10 to 15% of the total planet's population, despite being end of life, and Windows 7's end of support did not come until January 2020. Microsoft also started to warn users before Windows 7 reached its end of life, about the end of support for Windows 7, but many refused to ditch these older, obsolete operating systems, but it's not hard to understand why that's the case. Firstly, Microsoft charges absurd prices for Windows licenses, and the cost of a new laptop can be more than $1,000, depending on the specifications, but this clearly shows something. It shows that the people who cannot afford must do one of two things. 1. You steal a copy of Windows, which is surprisingly easy to do, or hacktivate it with a KMS tool. Or, you can buy a cheap Windows license from a place like CD Key Sales. And just so you know, this video is not sponsored or endorsed by CD Key Sales. When I say steal Windows, I really mean using it unactivated, and it's not like the cops are gonna arrest you for using an unactivated version of Windows, but it does tell Microsoft that your copy is not validated as genuine. So Microsoft will completely remove your ability to customize the operating system, and leave a rather annoying Activate Windows watermark. Windows 10 does not reach its end of life until October 14, 2025, which is not even a year away from the time of this video being produced, so why is Microsoft giving us an early warning? It could be in an attempt to get Windows 11's adoption rate rising, but as so many people live at, or below the poverty line, and many are not willing to give their money to Microsoft, it's hard to say for certainty whether Windows 11 will become as dominant, or more dominant than Windows 10. After Windows 10 reaches end of life, there will be people who are still hanging on to it, just like there are that still use Windows 7, Vista, XP, and so on, but the majority will have migrated to a newer operating system, and some users might consider Linux, as it offers them a free and open-source alternative to Microsoft's proprietary system. But Linux lacks much of the required software and games that most people want, so depending on what you do, Linux may or may not be a viable option. You could also consider Chrome OS Flex as an alternative, but if you're concerned about privacy, or rely on certain software, then this is not the best option either. If your PC cannot run Windows 11, it's time to buy a new PC or laptop. Even if you cannot afford it right now, perhaps consider saving up for a future purchase, or consider upgrading your current machine so that it can meet the system requirements. If you do decide to stick with Windows 10 after it stops getting security updates, here are some things you must keep in mind. First, your operating system will no longer be safe or secure, and any vulnerability found it will not be patched by Microsoft, or anyone else for that matter. Secondly, major software developers will stop supporting Windows 10. These may include Google, Microsoft, Apple, Nvidia, Adobe, and other popular software vendors. For hardware vendors, the story is the same. You can expect Nvidia, AMD, and Intel to stop offering any support to Windows 10 after it reaches its end of life. Thirdly, antivirus does not protect you against certain threats, and some malware can go undetected in an antivirus, so if you do use Windows 10 after it goes end of life, I would strongly recommend you install antivirus software and keep it up to date, because that's about the best protection you're gonna have if you continue to use Windows 10 once it's no longer supported, and even then, there's no guarantee that you won't become victim to something like ransomware, so it's really not advisable to use Windows 10 at all. Once Microsoft stops supporting it for good, it's time to move on, and you're gonna have to decide your fate, stay with Windows and get treated like a lab rat, or switch to a free and open source system but be extremely limited in what you can do. The choice is yours, and if Linux works well for you, good luck to you, but most of you probably won't want to switch to Linux, Chrome OS, or another operating system, and depending on what you do, it may or may not be the best thing to do. Anyway, with all that out of the way, we will now draw this video to a close. Please remember to like, share, comment, and subscribe. See you next video. Bye for now.